Welcome back to Loose Frame Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tyler Martin Olich, and joining me,
I'm Hillary Weber.
And I'm Birdie Doyle.
good morning, ladies. How are you?
Doing all right. Looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, we have a really exciting guest. Speaking of, who is our guest today?
Today's guest is Sean Michael Davis. He started his career at Full Sail as an intern and then did some amazing things from there. So
Yeah, really excited. He has a very varied career. We'll get into it for the interview, but he shot for cops for 8 years, almost 10 years, I think. And that's just a really fascinating story. And we haven't had anyone on the podcast yet that has sort of done that run and gun reality show or unscripted show. So I think it's gonna be a really interesting conversation.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited to hear him talk about the difference between unscripted camera work and then scripted and setting everything up.
It's really high pressure. So
I bet.
I'm sure he's got some crazy stories. And he wrote a book.
it's fantastic. It's very personal, very conversational, and you're about to learn some more about it.
And with that, we'll be right back with our guest, Sean Michael Davis. Welcome back to Loose Frame Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Martin Olich, and joining us now is our guest, Sean Michael Davis.
Hey, how's it
How
going?
are you? It has been a long time. We were chatting before we started rolling the cameras. It's had been probably 6, 7, maybe 10 years.
It's been a long time. It's been a long time for me because I've been on the road so much. You know, it's like my career took me on the traveling path as opposed to on the local path where a lot of our friends were able to stay and do local stuff.
Well, I'm really excited to talk to you. You've got just a ton of stuff to go through. You have a very varied history. Also, your book, for those watching, we'll get to that here in a bit as well. But let's set the table for our audience. You are a cinematographer, filmmaker, documentarian, man of many hats. But you got the bug for the film industry in a rather unusual way. So let's start talking about how you were sort of influenced in the music scene by your grandmother and then your father, who were on the radio, and then that somehow landed you at Full Sail University. So let's start there.
I know, I guess it's a weird path. I am a musician. I have been since I was like 12 years old. I got my first guitar in the basement of B&B Loans for like $10 as a closeout. My dad rewired it and ran it through a reel-to-reel as an amplifier. And so, you know, and I still play to this day. That's a passion of mine. But I think I developed that over a period of time because I'm essentially third generation broadcasting. My grandmother used to sing live radio in Cheektowaga, New York in the 30s. And then my father at a very young age, about 14, developed a passion for broadcasting, and he got into the radio industry, and he lied about his age and got a job as a overnight DJ for like 50 cents an hour and all the records he could steal. And his career just flourished. He's actually in the who's who of the broadcast industry. He climbed and wound up being a general manager for Clear Channel in Sarasota, and then went to Treasure and Space Coast Radio pre his retirement. Now he's retired, living the good life, and he still does voiceovers in his home office for major agencies and stuff because he's got unlike me, he's got an amazing voice. But it just kind of, that whole path has just kind of followed. And what's really exciting for me is my 17-year-old son, Kason, is a way better guitar player than I am now. So we sit out on the porch and jam, and he just blows me away. You know? And he's the teacher's assistant in his current high school for the media department. So he's kind of followed me in that direction as well. We'll see where it goes, but it's very exciting.
And you could have had a very different life. We were talking again off camera before we started rolling here, and you were on your way to the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And that trajectory could have taken you in a completely different life path.
Who knows?
Instead, your dad suggested you go to Full Sail. So let's talk about that a bit.
Yeah. So in high school, to be honest, and I think probably like a lot of kids in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was in a band, and I was, everything was awesome. But I had no clue. I had no direction. My stepfather was in the military. He was actually a staff sergeant in the Korean War. So he was very much into military, and he kind of raised me as well as my real father. We had a great relationship, but my real dad wasn't really into guns and stuff. So he called me one day and he's like, hey, you know, I heard about this new school called Full Sail, and if you don't sign up for the Marines, I'm happy to send you to Full Sail and get you a place to stay and try that. And I talked to my stepdad about it, and he's like, well, really, the only reason you're going into the Marines is so you can get a GI Bill.
Yeah.
You know, your dad's offering you a career, take it and see where it leads. And it was, the school was amazing. I loved Full Sail. I still do guest speaking for the students currently. And I really enjoyed it. But what happened when I got out was sometimes, and I don't think I'm the only person this has ever happened to, you graduate with a degree and all of a sudden you get into that profession and you're like, what have I done?
Yeah.
You know, it's like the bands were great. The setting up the drum kit and the microphones and the guitars and all that. I love that. But when that was done and now you are mixing the album, I'm literally just sitting there watching an engineer, you know, fiddle with a kick drum or a hi-hat for hours and hours, just trying to find that perfect sound and get that envelope and make it all work. But I was like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. So I called my career development, lady at Full Sail, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm kind of lost. And she said, well, there's an internship that's going to open up at Universal Studios on the backlot, and it's called Swamp Thing. It's going to be on the USA Network, and they're going to take 7 interns, basically one for each major department. It's an unpaid internship, and we're going to send 70 students over there to interview, and they're going to select 7. You're welcome to be one of those 70. Good luck. So I went in nervous, but I smiled and I tried to be as professional as I could and enthusiastic.
Yeah.
Because I was so passionate then about just anything. I'm like, let's give this a shot, you know, and God put me in that position, you know. I mean, I was one of the 7. So for the next, actually, it wound up being 2 seasons. I was able to experience, you know, a month in the grip department, in the lighting department, in the camera department, in the props department, in the special effects department. I got to go through the whole gamut and really see what was my jam and what wasn't. And it wound up being grip and lighting and camera. I just loved learning all the equipment, and I'm a button boy, you know, so all these gadgets and stuff. And I was like, this is awesome. So when that internship and that show was over, locally in the industry, I started volunteering. I did part-time work at First Unit, you know, painting apple boxes and anything I could do to get in. But at the same time, I knew nobody was really going to bring me in as a DP or camera department because I didn't have the experience. So I started volunteering all of the contests, 48-hour film contest, action film challenge, you know, whatever came out, I'm like, I'm there. And I would literally sleep on people's couches for a couple of hours and then go back to a scene because we would roll all night long. And then that footage would go to whoever was going to edit it. And we did really well. You know, my partner at the time was Cliff Gephardt, and we had a Rhino Studios in St. Pete. So we had, each time we did it, we had more and more people willing to volunteer because we were serious. We weren't just messing around. Yeah. We were there. When we did A Minute Too Late, which was a winner with 48-hour film contest, I think it was the last one we did, we counted. We had almost 60 cast and crew volunteering. We had a 5-ton grip truck. Everything was donated.
It was like a major production, even though it was a 48-hour.
Even though it was a 48, I mean, because everybody got involved and like, whatever you need, we've got it. When we did Pond, that was the same thing with Pond, is, you know, First Unit donated trucks and even people that wanted to be a part of it. So that was a great way to start and get my name in the industry locally.
One, you're very enthusiastic, but just going back to that brief part of history, there's a lot of coincidences, right? Your dad suggests going to Full Sail.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on. I don't want to be here. What am I doing in this industry? And then you call your career counselor, and that ends up in an internship, which 7 out of 70.
In a career that I never even thought about.
Right. And it placed you at Universal on Swamp Thing. And then what brought you back to Tampa? Was your dad was living in Sarasota still at the time, and that's what got you over here to the side?
Right. Well, obviously Full Sail's in Orlando.
Yeah.
At the time, my girlfriend, who was going to become my wife eventually, she wound up getting a job in the Tampa Bay market, and it was like, okay, let's move to Tampa and try this. And I actually got a job working for Clear Channel as a salesperson. And that was what kind of allowed me to still pay my bills, but do a lot of the freebie contests and stuff. I had a job, but then I was doing that on the side.
You went from doing short films, 40-hour film challenges, to working a very successful career in TV and on feature films and everything else. What was your first like professional job in the film industry that you weren't interning for, and you're like, someone actually paid me to be a DP or a camera op?
I would have to say Cops.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would have to say Cops. I was doing so many, not just the film contest, but by that time I was doing a lot of the small productions and industrial projects. And, I had a great relationship with, Ricky and Bobby at First Unit, and they were bringing me on. Todd Short was a mentor with the grip industry for me. And so he would, bring me on a lot of projects. And so I was doing a lot of stuff. But I was doing a lot of crazy stuff. I was having a lot of fun. I was paragliding with cameras and stuff like that. And the thing with Cops, it's very, very intense. And I had never realized how many camera guys they go through, not lose, but they quit because they're like, I didn't sign up for this. And they were in that position. And Jimmy Langley, who's John Langley's nephew, was basically the producer of the whole show. And he called Hank Barr, who's a dear friend of mine and a sound guy for Cops. And he's like, I need a shooter quick. And he's like, the only guy I can think of is Shawn Michael Davis. Give him a call. And he did. And I met him in a hotel room, interviewed with him. And it was the most interesting interview I think I've ever had because I was prepared. I had a demo reel and I had a resume and I had a nice folder and I had a Vistaprint business card, and I slid it all over and I'm like, oh, I've done this and this. And he's like, he just pushed it out of the way. I don't want to see any of that. He's like, this is like nothing you've ever shot. It doesn't matter. I just need to know that you can be calm under pressure and you can make this work. And I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And I thought I was in Tampa. I thought I was going to cover somebody in Tampa. He's like, okay, you start in 2 weeks in Seattle.
And off you were. And how long?
I just had a kid.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I'm like,
how did you explain it to your wife?
At the time I was just like, I don't have to do this, but I want to because it's Fox primetime Saturday night. And
Cops was a big, big deal at that time.
It was the number. It was Cops and America's Most Wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, that was it. The venue with Cops is tough because it's 2 months somewhere. And then you have a week off to gauze, and then you're back somewhere else for 2 months. And you do that 4 times a year. So the only time you really have off during the year is a couple of months through the holidays, and then you're back on. And it's all over the US. So
it's such an interesting show and the concept of it. I mean, you're basically riding along with cops and whatever happens, you're there to shoot. But I have to imagine that the officers you were in the car with probably weren't thrilled to be on camera or to have that kind of scrutiny. So how did you get them, I don't know, on your side? Like, how did you build that trust?
I'll try to make the story as concise as I can because it's so difficult. Just like the news media, law enforcement doesn't want you in their car because they're really concerned that you're going to jam them up in something. They're on camera. If they say the wrong thing, just unintentionally, but it just slips out, they could get in trouble with their command officer or their lead. And we would go to venues that we'd never been before. Now, some of the guys in lineup were excited, but the majority of them were like, I don't want him in my car. And a lot of times they didn't have a choice because the watch commander would say, you're riding with Shawn tonight. Yeah. And I don't want to. Well, tough, you're gonna, so just watch your butt and, stay on track. So what I would do normally, and I think all of the shooters had different techniques. Now there's only 7 of us across the United States, seven camera guys, 7 sound guys. Sound guys in the back seat, I'm in the front seat. So usually for me, the first night we'd meet and line up, we'd introduce ourselves. You could tell they were a little hesitant and I'd be like, okay, well, let's get on the road. I'd ask them to pop their trunk and I'd put my camera in the car. And then I get in the passenger seat and he's like, well, what are we doing? I'm like, for tonight, let's just ride. Let's talk.
Yeah.
I know the signals and codes. I've done this a long time. So I know what I think would be a good, thing for us to go to, as opposed to something that I know was never going to make TV. So I've got your back and let's talk about your family and, how long you've been in law enforcement and the things that are going to highlight you. And the one thing I would always say, and I was sincere about it, if they had kids, I said, my job for the next 2 months is to get you on a show that your daughter or your son's going to point at that TV and say, that's my daddy. How can anybody not get goosebumps when their kid's like, I'm so proud of you. That's my dad.
Yeah.
So that was my goal. And after they'd ride with me for a while and they realized that I could handle it, but I was also very focused on making sure that they looked as good as they possibly could to represent the department as good as they could. I have friends for life that I still talk to because of that show.
Yeah. I mean, film sets are dangerous places, and I'm using air quotes because we do everything we can to mitigate risk and make it a safe space. But short of being a camera person for a war correspondent, I don't know how many jobs in the greater film industry where you were actually in live danger while you're trying to do your job. So how did the first time you were in a dangerous situation and you just had to keep rolling and stay calm, how did you handle that? And do you remember what that situation was?
Honestly, I can't give you the very first one. Every night was dangerous.
Yeah.
Other nights weren't. Some nights it was raining and you literally just sat in the car all night going, oh God, I just want this shift to be over so I can get to the hotel room. But in general, if it was an active night, if the calls were ringing, we were first on. So I realized fairly quickly, number one, we were all issued a bulletproof vest. We all are very careful about our perimeter and our surroundings. The one story I can tell you I remember, I'll never forget, and I believe I put it in the book. I hadn't been doing it very long, maybe a couple of months. And we had a call for a retired law enforcement officer who just fell off the right track mentally. He was drinking, he was alone. He just wasn't in a good place. And he had a history relatively recently of calling 911 and saying he was going to kill himself. So we knew he had guns. He had two beautiful German Shepherds. But in a situation like that, you don't just go in as law enforcement, you go in with SWAT. You got to have a backup.
Yeah.
And so we went in what they call 2x2 cover formation, where you're just kind of clearing the rooms. And the dogs were beautiful. They were barking and everything. I was worried, well, they might attack, but they didn't. So we were able to work around the German Shepherds, and we went down to the basement and all the lights were off, and it was room by room by room. And there was actually two law enforcement officers in front of me, weapons drawn, flashlights. I'm the third man in, and there's a guy behind me. And as they were coming around a corner, there was an open door. So I backed into it so the guy behind me could go in as a 3-team. And that's when I realized, it just hit me. I'm like, I haven't cleared this room.
Oh, so
This could, you don't want that
yeah.
immediate. And I'm like, oh my, that's the fear. That's when you're like, this could have been the final bad decision I've ever made in my life. So I spun around, kicked on my light just to clear the room. Okay, it's empty, thank God. And we went on. But I can definitely say that's one that I remember because it just stops your heart.
Yeah.
You're like, wow.
Do you look back on that fondly, or you're like, now with some age between you and when Cops ended, like, what was I thinking taking that job?
I'll never regret it.
Yeah.
I'll never regret it. I had a ball. I've developed some of the most amazing relationships with some of the most, dear friends that I still stay in contact with. There were really, really tragic nights. The one thing with that show is they don't tell you always what you're showing up on.
Yeah.
Children are very difficult to deal with. Passed away children, situations like that. And sometimes it's a missing child, and you're out in the field looking for this child, and then you find them in a bad position. And it's so hard to turn the switch off. That was the one thing with Cops that, Jimmy never told me. Nobody ever told me. They're like, you have to find the ability to turn the switch on. And then when you get back to the hotel room, you got to turn it off because you're never going to sleep.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie. It took me some time even after I left the show to be able to turn that switch off. But what's so funny now, my wife asked me, because I fall asleep in like 5 minutes now. I used to never sleep, but now we get in bed and I fall asleep, and she's like, do you have no thoughts? Do you really have no thoughts? How do you do that?
I
And I'm
found
like,
my switch.
I found my switch.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that I was given that opportunity. It made me a way better shooter, because you can't say, oh, I missed them pulling crack out of the guy's pocket. Can you put it back in and pull it out again?
Yeah.
That's not an option. You're either almost premeditating what's going to happen next so you can be on it, or you're not going to make it. And the hard thing with that show is you have to get releases too.
Yeah.
So you don't just have to know how to shoot everything as soon as it happens and be right on it and be in focus and be steady. After it's all said and done, you have to be able to talk to that individual and say, hey, will you sign this? And that can be a trick.
Yeah, I bet.
Because they don't blur faces.
Yeah.
A lot of shows do. Langley was one of those companies. I mean, if it was like the best story on the planet, they might. But for the most part, they're like, if you don't get
The
signatures,
release, yeah.
don't send it to Burbank.
And how do you even approach that when they've just been arrested? They're in the back of the car. They're probably in the worst shape they've ever been in.
Delicately.
Yeah, I bet.
Delicately.
And was that your job as the
Yeah.
shooter? You didn't have a producer going around? It was literally just you and the camera guy. I'm sorry, you and the audio guy.
My card title was field producer. Just me and an audio guy. And that was another lesson learned. And there's a lot of lessons that you learn in life. And these are all lessons that I am very happy for. But when I first started, the truth is you're riding in a cop car, you're in a black bulletproof vest with 511 tactical pants and flashlights on you. And you kind of think you're a cop.
Yeah.
You kind of almost think you're above the law. It's like, I'm riding with these guys. I can do anything I want. And then I would just be pushing these guys for releases. And they're like, no, absolutely not. Forget it. Go away. And a really good friend of mine, Chris Flores, who'd been shooting that show for a long time, took me aside and he's like, once you remove that attitude and you become more humble and understand that they're having a way worse day than you are,
Yeah.
you're having an exciting night, they're going to jail. Once you can become empathetic, you're going to get the signatures. And that's exactly what I did. I would have to get in the backseat of the car with them and the doors had to be closed because there's a thing called color of authority. And if I say, if you're a law enforcement officer and I say, hey, sign this, and they sign it, their attorney can come back and say, well, but that was under the color of authority. The cop was
Yeah,
right
he
there. He
coerced them.
thought he had to sign it. It's coercion. So I would get in the backseat of the car and I started learning, it's just like, this sucks for you. I get it. This is a bad day. I can't get you out of it, but dude, I'm not a cop. I'm just a guy doing my job. I'm trying to feed my family. This may or may not make TV. I could probably get you a smoke before they take you downtown, but that's about it. And who knows? I'm not the guy who decides what airs and what doesn't.
Yeah.
But would you sign it? And all of a sudden, sometimes happily because they love the show. Other times still absolutely not.
I didn't even think about that, but there had to have been situations where they're getting arrested and they realize that there's someone from Cops filming them and
They
they're a
always
fan of the
knew.
show and they're like, oh my God, I'm on TV. And this got to be a weird moment.
Everybody knew it was the Cops
Yeah.
crew. So one of the hardest things that we had to work around was when you're shooting a traffic stop and there's 10 people on the side across the streets going, bad boys, bad boys. Well, you can't have that. So it was like, oh, and you just keep rolling.
Yeah.
But hopefully you can just almost look as discreet as possible and still get the shots because everybody across the street knows that you're with the Cops crew. And trust me, the word gets out quick. When we went to Tulsa, within like 3 days, the entire town knew Cops was there.
Yeah. And you're there embedded with that particular law agency for what, 2-3 weeks?
2 months.
2 months. So,
2 months.
So yeah, you're right. After 3 days, they know there's someone riding around.
Yeah, now they're just looking for which car has a camera guy jump out.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would go to lineup, introduce ourselves, and then we would immediately go to work. And our normal shift was like 3 in the afternoon till 2 a.m. And then if we were in the middle of a good story, we'd work until the morning. I mean, you just kept going.
So let's move on from Cops.
Yeah.
So just selfishly, because we're recording this here in Tampa Bay, you worked on another project called Charlie Wall, which was produced and directed by the Pete Guzzo, who was a previous podcast guest. And for those who don't know, give us a little bit of history of what Charlie Wall was about.
Charlie Wall was a lot of fun to work on. I mean, I love Pete. Pete and I have worked together on a lot of little stuff over the years for a long time. We've known each other since we were, I would almost say kids, really starting out in this. And it was a really interesting documentary about kind of, I would want to say like the mafia kingpin of Ybor.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be fair, I would almost say legendary. Mm-hmm. And Pete and his brother, kind of took on this goal to create this documentary about it. And they're both so incredibly talented. Obviously, Paul's such an amazing writer. And Pete called me and said, hey, would you be willing to shoot some of the reenactment stuff? We want to do it gritty. We want to do it, we're going to make it black and white. We want some dolly stuff in the bar. We want some, we got some gunshot play and all that. And of course I'm like, yeah, I'm there. And I worked so great with Pete. I mean, it wasn't work. It was just creativeness. It was really everybody. Dave Cook was my gaffer. Bobby Baker was my electrician on it. And everybody's just like, hey, I got an idea. And Pete was so good about that because it's like, it just enhanced everything that we're doing, even lighting. You
Yeah.
know, sometimes I'd be like, well, I just want all the lights, you know, coming down from the ceiling and give it almost that interrogation look. And Dave would be like, yeah, but we should flood out the back so you see the bottles too. And I'm like, you're right. You know, let's do it. And I think the shots came out great.
It's a great documentary, and the book that Paul wrote after the fact was also fabulous.
Yeah.
And it's one that I wish they would, speaking now to Pete, if he's listening to this, you should really start putting out your older work, because a lot of the stuff gets, you know, dust collecting in a cabinet somewhere. It's like, put it out there, man.
Yeah. I don't even remember the guy's name. I thought it was like Leon or something, but way back when we would do homemade shorts, and there was a place in Ybor where we would play them. And this one guy, he had a long beard, and he would organize this, and then he would like write a little synopsis about, you know, and give you a grade, if you will. And I mean, Pete and I had done stuff like that on it. And you were so excited to get online and see how he, you know, rated your little short film that you did.
Yeah.
Do you remember him?
I do. I wish I remembered his last name. He passed away a couple of years ago.
He was a little older, but boy, he was passionate about it.
He was.
And it's a great avenue for us.
Yeah, and actually that inspired Pete to create what was it? The Tampa Film Review,
right?
Where he started doing the same thing.
Basically the same thing. Yeah. By that time, I had kind of gone on the road.
Yeah. So let's transition now away from Charlie Wall. You worked on Cops for 10 years total.
I think about 8.
8 years. What was the next big series you got on after that?
Well, I don't want to say the next. I mean, I don't know if I could say this. It would be Jailed, Inside American Jailed, or Jailed, because that was also Langley. And you know, I basically retired from Cops because my son was really starting to grow, and I wanted to be there and really start spending time with him. And Neil, who was our production coordinator at the time, had said, you know, would you do Jailed? And I'm like, okay, you know, to me, it was less dangerous. I didn't, you know, I still had to wear the vest, but it was less dangerous. And I hated it, you know, to be fair, because it was just, you know, drunk tanks and grossness. And so I only did that for maybe a couple of months. And I was like, guys, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm just done. And during that time, I was doing some day plane work at HSN, and I was ACing for several of the DPs, and Chris Buck came in, and we were shooting this commercial, and he's like, you know what? He's like, I am getting so busy with House Hunters. I think I could use you as a second shooter because I need somebody that's really comfortable with handheld.
Yeah.
You know, back then they're 33-pound cameras and there is no tripod. He's like, I need somebody that can do this. And I was like, well, I'll give it a shot. And that turned into like 5 years on the road House Hunters. I loved it. I had a
lot
ball
less
with it.
dangerous.
A lot less dangerous. People are really nice. You know, all over the United States. So you see all that different architecture, the red brick northern homes and the fireplaces and the stuff that's a jam for me. So I was like, this is great. Developed wonderful relationships with, you know, friends on that as well. But it was just, other than physically, it was still fairly intense because you just constantly got a cam. I mean, like my chiropractor's like, you're permanently like this. You know, I'm like, I get that. And then I actually shot the very first tiny houses, which is hysterical because I'm not small. You know,
you were a very tall guy.
I'm 6'3", and it was a 90 square foot trailer. So my sound guy was outside of the trailer. We ran the cable through the window, and I've got the widest lens that I can have on my camera. And I'm just like literally stuck just like doing this as people are walking and going, oh, I like the cabinets, and oh, look at the refrigerator. And I'm like holding my breath, you know, trying to just skinny up as much as I can. But that was the pilot, and it did great. So I think that show was on for several seasons.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of it shot here in Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Most of your career, you had to travel for the shows. Was that wearing on you? I mean, it can't be great for trying to create a relationship or stability.
Yeah, it's absolutely. That's a whole chapter, I think. You know, one of the things that I with this book that I intend is I'm never going to stop. I'm never going to retire. But I certainly have every intention when I'm ready to hang up my hat, I'll go to work for a school and I'll teach. And I want the kids to be able to use my book as part of the curriculum, because those are all points of contention to consider.
Yeah.
You know, and again, shout out to Susie, my beautiful soulmate and wife, because she understands, but not everybody does. They really don't. And it can be arduous, and you're calling your kids at night and you're calling your wife at night. And I don't do bars. I'm not a big drinker. So it's not like, oh, the show's over, I'm going to go party. And, you know, I went to the hotel room,
Yeah.
and that's lonely. You know, it can be a tough place. And part of that, I was actually still on House Hunters when I started writing this book, because that was my creative avenue to have some positive expression that wasn't just like, oh, I'm just going to sit here and watch TV.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you, to be fair, it's to this day, it's still really cool when I can lay in bed in the morning with my coffee and I see a Cops episode or a House Hunters or an Emerald that I shot.
Yeah.
And I see them all the time because I shot a lot of them.
So speaking of positivity, and this is going to be a strange turn as far as the conversation goes because it's from a very dark place, but you were able to create a really interesting, meaningful, and impactful documentary in Skyway Down.
Yes.
That ended up being a very positive thing for a lot of people who were suffering or had tragedies resulting from the bridge. So we're talking about the Skyway Bridge. I'm sorry, I set that up horribly. But the Skyway Bridge is one of the largest bridges or tallest bridges. I think it's the tallest bridge in Florida, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and one of the tallest in the country. And unfortunately, like a lot of tall, famous bridges, like the Golden Gate Bridge, there's a lot of suicides that somehow are attracted to that space.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to make that documentary?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually it's also the third most common bridge to jump off of. People have actually traveled from out of state to make that their final statement. You know, with the internet and Google, it's very easy to get all kinds of information. There were websites about the Skyway Bridge suicide jumpers. It's been going on for decades, even with the original bridge. But I was driving over the Skyway Bridge one beautiful sunny afternoon, going from St. Pete over to the Parish Palmetto area. And I just happened to look, and I remember it was like, God, this is a beautiful day. I mean, the water was blue, the posts were yellow and gorgeous. And I'm like, what a beautiful day. And I look to my left and there's this young lady straddling the wall. And I'm like, oh, that's not good. And then she was gone. I watched her, you know, the body just disappeared. So immediately I pulled over, jumped out of my car. There was cars coming, so I had to wait, but I was on the opposite bridge. Ran over, could not see her, called 911, and you know, they answer, it's like, 911, what's your emergency? And I'm like, I just watched somebody jump off the bridge, get people out here now. And she's like, please hold, and put me on hold. And I'm like, well, that's never happened. And then all of a sudden the phone rings again, and I hear, 911, what's your emergency? And I'm like, I'll say it again.
Yeah.
Well, what I learned later is that even though theoretically I was in St. Pete,
It's Tampa.
the shipping channel zip code is owned by Tampa. So they just had to transfer me to Tampa. So I didn't know that at the time. But it was very impactful. I drove home and I was like, this girl's no longer with us. And I know it before her family does. And this is so tragic. And I didn't know anything about suicide. I don't have any family members that have committed suicide, thank God. I'm very empathetic towards it. So I started doing some studying on that bridge and the things that were happening. And finally I was like, I have the ability to do something that could potentially keep one person from jumping off that bridge. I have the contacts, I have the equipment, I have the friends. God just gave me this new calling and I followed it. And I called Sheriff G with Hillsborough County at the time. He was the sheriff. I called all of my friends who were PIOs and a buddy of mine, Scott, who used to work for Fire Station 11, which was one of the recovery boats. I just started making calls. I'm like, will you guys offer me the ability to film you in the job that you do, to educate? And it just started rolling. I mean, originally I was going to have it narrated. Ted Webb was going to narrate it back in the day. But as I started editing the pieces together that I shot, because the way it would work is I'd shoot 2 or 3 interviews on my week off. And then I'd go back to the hotel room and I'd start editing them in Final Cut. And I was, you know, trying to do it around writing a script. And all of a sudden it's like, I'd finish one interview where, you know, the sister would be like, well, but who really watches the bridge? You know, who keeps an eye on that for jumpers? And then the next clip I would drag in would be from PI going, oh, we do a detail on the bridge, you know, 24/7. We have one guy that's on a detail. I'm like, well, that answered her question. So that works. What if I piece those two together and it's like question, answer, question, answer. And then I was able to, through the help of friends and people in high places, interview the Hillsborough County Medical Examiner's Office and the medical examiner. And then I met with the Crisis Center of Tampa Bay. David Broughton was very gracious. He's like, I'm going to give you all my counselors and you can interview them. So again, I didn't know anything about the topic, but I did know how to set up a pretty picture and get good audio. So that's all I was doing. I was just compiling hard drives of stuff, and I didn't know what was going to wind up making it and what wasn't. But at the end of the day, it's like an hour and 8 minutes long or something. You know, it's not super long. It explains all of the factors that go into when somebody jumps. It explains the mental illness, which is the number one concern we should all be talking about. Getting people help when they need it. But it's also about all the other factors involved once the decision has been made. I interviewed a survivor, Hans Jones. And when I sat him down, I was like, I'm just going to roll, and I'm going to start this by saying, just talk to me about what went through your mind, and I'm going to shut up. And he started talking. And it's like everything he said, the hair on the back of my neck was just raising, because he's like, the second my body left that wall, I wish I hadn't done it.
Yeah.
All I wanted to do was live. And it broke him up. And I mean, it's a miracle that he's alive. But, you know, he became a very strong advocate, and don't do this. Get the help you need, you know, because now he's got beautiful children that weren't here then. His whole dynamic on life has changed for the better, because fortunately that was not his demise. And the one thing that I have 3 texts that I save in a file on my phone from people that were in such a dark place, they started Googling, and they, instead of getting in the car, they actually saw my film was attached and watched my film and personally reached out to me to say thank you and that they didn't jump. That's my pay it forward. And every day I'm having a bad day or a tough day, I look at my phone.
That's amazingly powerful.
Yeah.
And it played at Sunscreen, had a couple of viewings. What was the response from people after they watched that in the crowd, in the audience? I mean, it had to have been.
It was quiet.
Yeah.
It was quiet. It's so funny because, you know, my mom and, you know, everybody's like, I want to come to the award ceremony, you know, after the fact. And I was like, oh, you know, when it played, it's like, nobody really said anything. I don't think this film's going to go anywhere. I mean, I got an applause, of course, but it was very quiet. And I guess what I thought was, you know, well, hopefully people are just really thinking about it, which was my goal, to be fair. But it wasn't the reaction. I was kind of like, whoa, you know, confetti falling from the ceiling and, you know, balloons, and didn't get any of that. And so I told everybody, it's like, no, don't, you know, I'm just going to go, I'm going to, you know, show my face, and then I'm going to come home and have a beer. And I won Best Florida Film.
Yeah.
So I kind of had to go home and tell my family, well, I won Best Florida Film, you know, but it's not about that. It never was about that. I'm still to this day so proud of that film, because if nobody ever watches it again, that's a shame, because I still think there's people out there that need that help. Mm-hmm. The vehicle for mental health hasn't changed. So I would encourage anybody who's feeling that way to watch it. And if it helps you, fabulous. But I know that I did my part.
Yeah.
And that I get to live with that. And I sleep well at night because of that.
You've shot a lot of other people's shows. Mm-hmm. But Skyway Down was a personal project that you took on your own, saw it to completion, and it's helped people definitely, and I hope it continues to help people. Do you think there's another story inside of you that you want to tell, or something that is personal to you going forward, that I want to just do another documentary, I want to do another feature film that you've created, that's yours?
I don't know. I'm going to be honest. I've you know, the documentary was a lot of work and a lot of learning. I'm not opposed to doing another documentary. I mean, in my position, I kind of feels like, well, I wrote a book, I made a documentary, it did well, I'm happy with my accomplishments. I think at this point, I'm more passionate about working with other people on their projects, because I'm not saying I don't want to be behind the helm, but when you're behind the helm, as you know, you have to control everything.
Yeah.
Not that you have to control it, but you want to make sure it's going in the direction you want it to go. And that takes so much off your creative mindset because you're worried about catering. You're worried about, what time's the truck going to get here? You're worried about getting the permit for this location. You're worried about, the one actor, and I'm not going to lie, the one actor showed up drunk out of their mind. And how do we deal with that? And I mean, all those, at least if I'm just there to direct or to, make a pretty picture and work with a group of people, I'm kind of in that mode now.
Yeah.
My deal is I'm home. I'm off the road. I'm done traveling. I would like to settle down in a local agency or a local business that's doing a bunch of creative stuff and want somebody with my line of experience to come on board and be part of the family and be creative with everybody, as opposed to A, traveling all the time, and B, having to just control the whole gamut of insanity.
Yeah. You work a lot. In fact, over the years, you're always out there working, but you're also someone that has a reputation in town that if you need something, if you need help, you can call Sean and he'll roll up and help shoot or whatever it might be.
To this day, to this day, if I don't have a paid gig going on a Wednesday and I'm at home, and they're like, "Hey, will you come help me do this thing?" Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about teaching? Maybe taking all that experience?
I have every intention of teaching. Like I said, when I retire, I want to, maybe it's Full Sail if I can get Susie to be willing to move to Orlando. I'm not sure if even I want to move to Orlando. But, at one time I was on the board for the IADT here, the review panel. If there's a school that opens up that makes sense for me with the students, I don't ever want to stop. I don't really want to retire. But when I can no longer lift a sandbag or a 33-pound camera, I can lift a book and be like, hey, let's talk about, the kids, because they're the next generation of George Lucas's and amazing people that are going to do amazing things, that I'm excited to see that.
Yeah. Well, in a small way, is there a piece of advice that you would give to someone starting out? Not everyone's going to have that opportunity to, go to this internship and maybe you get on.
Right.
So what is the one piece of advice you'd give someone who is passionate or doesn't know what they're getting out of high school? Like, what am I supposed to do now?
Work like you've never worked. Be absolutely diligent in your passion. My dad used to tell me, if you're not 30 minutes early, you're 15 minutes late. Leave your damn phone in your pocket on silent, pull out the earbuds, focus, pay attention to what's going on around you. Because here's the reality. The main people that are in charge of that production are probably my age, and they have a work ethic, and they got there because they worked really hard. So if you show up and you got your music going on and you're staring at your phone and you're 5 minutes late and you're in flip-flops, I'm not going to be judgmental, but I'm going to be like, yeah, that's not the person I want to really invest my time in.
Yeah.
I worked so hard at my internship at Swamp Thing. I literally tied a rope around my shorts as a belt so I could hang my gloves and my tape roll on it, because that's what everybody else had. And I didn't have a belt, the first 3 days or so. I didn't even think about it. So I literally took some black twine and made a belt, and I hung a tape roll and all that. And they saw that. They respected that. So when the Snap-on truck rolled up, they all pitched in and they bought me a belt and a Leatherman and a glove clip and a set of gloves. And they're like, dude, you're busting your butt here.
Yeah.
That meant a lot to me, but it meant a lot to them, because I would grab 2 sandbags in each hand and, run and do whatever they needed to do. I just think, and I put it in the book, it's like work, work, work. Keep your mouth shut unless you have something legitimate to say. Keep your ears open. That's why you have 2 of those. Yeah. Learn, but at the same time, enjoy it. Really be passionate about the fact that you're blessed enough to be in this industry, because it's such an amazing industry. And if you can stay in it, you're absolutely blessed, but it's not given to any of us.
Yeah. That's a great piece of advice. And we've had I think 30 some odd guests now. And every time I ask that question, they usually give that same answer. And
good.
It's because it's one of the most important pieces of advice is be present on a film set.
Yeah.
You can't do that if you're staring at a phone, if you got earbuds in. You learn more by watching the people around you.
Yeah.
And actually taking it in than you'll ever learn in a classroom. You've got to be there.
It drives me nuts when I see it on set, and it's, and I'm not gonna say it's always the PA, it's not, it could be anybody there. But when you see the younger generation, they just have this different outlook because they were allowed to do it in college and even at home with their mom and dad, they didn't care, electronic babysitters or whatever. But when you're on set, number one, safety first.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be paying attention about everything around you because there's very heavy equipment. There's stands that can fall over. But if you really want to continue in the industry, the more you can grab a hold of even an individual that you really respect what they're doing and cling on and be like, what do you need? How can I help you? You want a glass of water, anything, just absorb.
Yeah.
And that's the way I was.
Yeah.
So,
and this is definitely an industry where if you're passionate about it and people see that passion, people will help you in your career. I've never been on a film set where people who were passionate weren't treated with respect and weren't helped. Just like you were saying with the Swamp Thing, where they saw what you were doing, like, oh, we're going to help this kid out. We're going to buy him his first set of tools.
Yeah.
People will do that in this industry.
I've worked with just about everybody in Tampa. I would say many, many times. Curtis Graham is a mentor for me, and Bill Mills is a mentor for me. I busted my butt. Every time I was on their set, I worked 110%, and they respected it. So they both have two completely different styles of shooting and lighting. And I mean, 180, polar opposites from each other.
Absolutely.
Curtis lights one way, Bill lights completely different. Bill's more like of an industrial, get her done kind of thing, but his stuff always looks amazing. And that's why he's got, 5 Emmys from National Geographic. Curtis comes from a photography background because his dad owned Graham Studios, and he just sees the lighting the way he does as an artist. But because I worked so hard for both of them, they would constantly bring me on. Now, they weren't big paying projects, but they're like, we need Sean on this.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'd drive the truck, but I would absorb every set and I'd see, why did they place that light there? And then I'd look and see, well, how are they manipulating it? And how is it actually working? And, Curtis said one of the most amazing things to me one time. We were just after a show having a beer, and I was asking him about his brain. And he said, if it looks lit, you've lit it wrong. If it doesn't look like there's a light in the room, then you've lit it right.
Yeah.
But you're going to start with the overhead lights off. It's going to be pitch black. And now you got to light that like it's not lit. And that's the way you have to think. And I'm like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then, one of the things, Bill Mills told me is, as they all say, time is money, but in the fact that the stuff he does is so much more run and gun. Get the back edge, get the key, figure out what they're doing because they're probably going to be moving, have a second key if they're walking into it, make sure it stays even, so thin out the lights and work with them. And I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense too, And those are the little things that I kept picking up. So when I started doing my own projects, especially like the run and gun kind of stuff, obviously there's no lighting in Cops,
Yeah.
But, real, like even House Hunters, there is lighting and there is interviews. And I started really, it's almost like I'd hear Ben Kenobi in my mind going, light it this way. And well, okay. Sometimes I just didn't know,
So we're coming to the end of the interview here. I want to give you an opportunity to tell us what's next for you. You're looking for maybe an agency job, a little more permanence.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you've a very long, varied career? Is there anything you haven't done that you're like, oh man, I wish I could be on this show or do something like that? Maybe naturally we want to be going on a safari somewhere. I mean, what haven't you done that you want to do?
Well, I've shot for National Geographic. We did Blowdown, and that was an amazing show as well, where we literally blew up the rocket tower at Kennedy Space Center. And I love shooting for them as well. I would say if I could choose any projects, number one, I am a major animal lover. I love dogs. I love horses. I love, just about any beautiful creature, like that. So anything, more animal, like here's an example. My wife and I met through a show called Bark Angels. And it's when I had the studio in St. Pete, and Susie was doing a podcast next door in our recording studio, and she wanted to do a show called Bark Angels about service dogs. And a good friend of ours, Anne Marie, introduced us and said, well, Sean's got all the contacts for that, and he's our local filmmaker. And so we met, and we started doing this really cool show about service dogs. And we did cadaver dogs, and we did rescue dogs, and we did drug dogs, but we also did like a diabetes dog. And we would go to these houses and we would interview these people and do some B-roll. But this one guy, he was a truck driver and he is a diabetic, and they got him a little dachshund, and the trainer, it was amazing because she would go to the house and wait for him to go into a diabetic fit. And then she'd have him take off his glove and put it in the freezer. And then they'd give him his insulin. But then she'd come back a couple of days later and she'd pull that glove out and she'd hide it somewhere in the house. And she'd be like, okay, Binky, go find the glove.
Yeah.
And what it essentially did is it trained that dog to smell when he's just going into an insulin dependent stage. And the dog would alert him while he's driving a semi so he could pull over and take his medication. And I'm like, it's fascinating.
Amazing. Yeah.
That's fascinating. So, anything like that, and anything, I guess, that would be like hospital related in a good sense.
Yeah.
I don't want to film a morgue. I've done that. But, positive cancer, recoveries. And I love all that stuff. I'm
it's
kind
putting
of
positivity back in the world.
Yeah. I'm in a feel good stage in my
Yeah.
life. I'm blessed. I have a beautiful family. I have a beautiful home. I've had a successful career. But I want to stay away from some of the cynical stuff at this point.
That's great to hear. If people are interested in, we'll get to the book in a second for a pitch, but if people want to watch Skyway Down, where can they find it right
YouTube.
now? YouTube.
Yep. And type in Skyway Down 2019 because there's actually 2 up. One was rendered wrong and it's a little wonky looking, so I don't ever pitch that. But in 2019, I updated the stats.
Okay.
And that's before the barrier went up. So it's the most accurate information before the barrier went up. So it really gives you a taste of what the pandemic was at the time with that situation.
Yeah. And then your book is Shoot to Thrill.
Yep.
If people are interested, where can they find a copy?
Amazon Kindle.
Okay.
Yep. And that was a great experience for me too. Like I said, I wrote it in a hotel room, and as I started writing it, just more and more stuff came out. And I'm like, God, I wrote more stuff. I've forgotten more stuff than I wrote.
Yeah. And we can only touch on a couple of the stories in the book, but you have had a long career with a lot of really interesting projects you worked on, and it's all in the book. Definitely a really good, quick read. I would recommend it to anybody.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And then if people are interested in learning more about you, do you have an Instagram or a Facebook you want to plug?
No.
That's the best answer.
Here's what's
Stay off social media.
Yeah, here's what's funny. I'm probably one of the only people out there that doesn't have social media because I think it's a waste of time. I had a LinkedIn, I had a Twitter, I had a Facebook, I had an Instagram. I never really got any work out of them. People that call me because they know me. And I watch people on these things and they're just scrolling through their Twitter or their LinkedIn. And I'm like, just call me, email me or call me.
Yeah.
Get a hold of me that way. That's the easiest way because I'm probably going to be on the road or, locally doing something or whatever.
Sean, it's been a fascinating discussion. I really appreciate your time today. And just on behalf of Tampa Bay, again, I said your reputation is sterling. People know they can call you. You've always been there to help and mentor locals. We really appreciate that.
I really appreciate you having me.
Thanks, bud.
This has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Appreciate it. And absolutely, man. It was good seeing you.
Yeah.
And for our audience, we'll be right back. And we're back. That was an awesome discussion. I'm not going to lie, I started tearing up when he was talking about Skyway Down. You probably saw that on camera. Like I just get a little tense in my throat there.
We'll make sure to zoom in on your eyes.
Please, yeah, just the one single tear rolling down. It was really emotional though. Some really interesting stories. What was some takeaways?
I thought whether he was talking about his work on Cops or with Skyway Down, just the way that he builds those relationships, whether it's with the police, with the criminals, with other subjects of the film, just hearing him talk about that process and how he uses empathy and discretion going into that to get the best possible material. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah. What about you, Rory?
That was across the board. One of the things within all of his career was that he's passionate and that he's really believing in the thing that he's doing. Like from beginning to end, he was excited about starting at Full Sail, not knowing anything about it. He was excited about Cops and he was empathetic towards the people on Cops. But then as far as he wraps it up by saying that he's taught and he looks forward to teaching. And so it's like he has passion throughout, which is what made it so engaging.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you said that too, because one of the other through lines that I also felt was there was this idea of mentorship and having strong mentors and having them help guide your career. Is there anybody for you that has been an important mentor?
Ooh, that's a great question. Wow. Yes. So I had a professor, Greg Bachman, who is still alive. I'm not talking in past tense, but he was someone that not only helped me in my career, he gave me good life advice. I like Sean almost. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Took a very circuitous path to get into the film industry. And he told me at one point, took me aside and said, this is a very difficult industry to get into. You need to have a backup plan. And I really hadn't thought about that. Like, what's plan B? And he's like, I really think you would be a good teacher. You should consider going and getting an MFA or a PhD. Even if you don't want to do it, you have a fallback plan. And it is very difficult to get into this industry, and it's lean and mean, feast famine. Sometimes you have paychecks coming in, sometimes you don't. And for those first couple of years, I was able to work nights teaching Pell classes at the local universities, which gave me just barely enough money to pay my bills, but that allowed me to be PAs on sets or do this or that. And if I didn't have that sort of stability in the background, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So that was one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given.
Yeah. I gotta say, and I hope this is common knowledge, but I miss Aaron Walker because he was a major person in my life. He was my advisor at UT when I was there, and he was our senior SEM person. And he did great things as far as connecting me with people and networking me around. I hate to say it like that, but helping me with networking and introducing me to people.
Yeah.
So,
what about you, Hillary?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Oh, I asked it.
You asked it.
Yeah.
You got to answer your own question.
Because I come from the film festival world, there have been a lot of really strong female executive directors that I've looked up to that have run film festivals. So one of them for me was Christina Ruthier at the Savannah Film Festival. I just had like an incredible opportunity being able to learn from her and shadow her and learn not just about one aspect of running a film festival, but so many different areas of operation. And she was the one who kind of gave me the idea, like, you could do more than this film festival. Like, there's film festivals all over. You could go work as many as you can. And I'm like, yeah, actually, that sounds like a good idea. So,
have you guys been able to pay it forward the way that Sean Davis has been talking about?
I was just going to ask that question.
Read your mind.
That was one of the things I think, if anyone takes anything away from this episode, it's one, be present on sets, but also realize what people are giving to you, both their time, their knowledge, their energy, and then give that back. And I said it, and I meant it at the end of the podcast, that Sean is someone who has a reputation that if you need something, you can call him and he will show up. No matter how far away the drive is, if he's available, he will be there to lend you some gear, help you set up lights, shoot your show, whatever it might be. But he's a guy that does that.
He's there
and
for you.
I don't think that is a rarity in the film industry. I actually think it's very common in the film industry because I think most people learn that way. And at some point it clicks in their head, all right, well, now I'm the more experienced person and I got to give it back. I have always tried to give as many opportunities to students that I've worked with over the years. I try to keep in contact with them. Anytime I can get them on a film set, I do. I really respect people's time and energy when they give it to me. And I try to give just as much back.
And then it's really rewarding too when you see that pay off. Yeah. One of my favorite stories, actually, and I guess it's already been 10 years, but I was working for a film festival and we needed some volunteers. So I reached out to the local film school, and one of the most fabulous volunteers that we had was a young man by the name of Raymond Knudsen. And then he was a passionate film student, really learned something new on the film festival side. And then from there went on to intern for a film commission and produce films, and now he's shot a film in Tampa that made it to Sundance. He's going to be coming back and filming another movie here. So it's really exciting when you do invest in someone and then see it pay off later on. Like, it's so cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's cool that we have this podcast and we bring on people like this because he consistently broke the stigma of the big egos in this industry. Because you're right, it's not rare that they take this approach of paying it forward and being passionate about the art and the people a part of it. So it's nice to show that there's like a 1% with the big egos, but then everyone else is, paying it forward.
There's definitely a lot of big egos in this industry, but I think, especially on the below the line, the crew level.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say film school students are a rarity, but this is not an industry where you have to be a film student, right? So how did you get into the film industry? It's usually because you stumbled your way onto a film set and someone took the time to teach you what your skill sets need to be for that particular thing you want to do. So I do feel like there is that moment in most people's career where they start paying it forward and really trying to mentor the next generation. So it's a good feeling.
I'm really glad that my first job was working with interns for that reason, because it gave me the soft spot for interns, and I myself was an intern. So it's nice to see the full circle and pay it forward.
I try never to forget people too. So if someone work for me, or I saw some passion in somebody, even if I don't think about them for 3, 4, 5 years, but all of a sudden something comes up. It's like, oh, they would be really good for that. Like, I always try to reach back and say, hey, I don't know where you're at in your life, but I have an opportunity for you. See what you can do.
100%. As far as his advice with being diligent and focusing and, working hard, what do you guys think of that? Is that the biggest part of it, or is that a small fraction and there's 5 to 6 other things that need to run with it?
That's a really good question. I think that is one of the biggest parts of it.
Yeah.
This is not an industry where you can just sort of sit back and let the career happen around you. You really have to work hard. People's time is money. This is definitely an industry that respects money and just what you're putting in on the screen. And that doesn't get on the screen unless people are willing to work hard behind the scenes to get it up there. So I think this is an industry and a career path, if you're interested in doing that you really have to show up on set every day, ready to work. Don't show up hungover. Don't show up with your phone out. Be ready to, minute they say you need to do something, be there, do it, get it done.
And the phone thing, that's new. That's like a new thing everyone has to learn, because that wasn't happening when he started his career. The other thing that the way that he was working hard, like you said, was being on the road full time. Do you think you could be on the road full time for this industry?
Oh yeah, 100%.
You're
I
down
love
with
traveling.
that.
Yeah.
You do a lot of film festivals. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I hated that part of it. I did not like all of the travel. And I love going places for vacation, but I hate hotels. And that's
so
the
fair.
worst part of this entire job is when I would be on a set someplace else and I wasn't close to home and I had to sit there in some crappy motel, because you're usually not being put up in the Four Seasons, right? So it's not the most glamorous part of it, and some people are really attuned to that and they're fine. Other people struggle with it. I struggled with it. He mentioned the fact that he was divorced. There's a lot of divorces in this industry, and I think it's mainly because it's an industry that pulls you away from those sort of nuclear family centers, because you're going here, you're going there, and it's a lot of late nights, a lot of hard work. So it is an industry where you probably need to find a partner who gets that part of the industry,
or is in the industry too.
Yeah,
that's the big one.
Or it's going to be a real struggle. I think.
And that's what he said. He met his current wife and his soulmate on a set.
Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was interesting too is he was talking about, there's a lot of travel and being diligent and present on film sets, but even in the face of a lot of like tragedy and trauma, there's a lot that you go through, whether you're doing a documentary on something traumatic like Skyway Down, or you're working on cops and you're seeing all of these crimes in progress and the aftermath of that, to still have that sort of outlook and perspective, I think is really refreshing.
Well, I mean, not everyone can do it, but he mentions flipping the switch, and there is a point in this career, especially if you're trying to do something like documentaries and some heavy subject matter, where you do have to just turn your brain off and say, all right, I've clocked out now, and now I'm going to focus on something else, and I can't think about that other part. That doesn't make you less of a creative or craftsman. It's just compartmentalizing this and that, so that you do have your own space set aside, that not to say safe space, but something that you can relax and unwind in, because otherwise you're going to just be keyed up and you're never going to be able to come down from that.
There's so many industries like that where you think like these are, I hate to call them heroes, but like these are the heroes, because it's like, gosh, I couldn't do that, dealing with tragedy and death all the time.
Yeah, that's a lot. I don't know how he did it for 8 years. I couldn't have done it.
It was such a major, I hate to call it cultural, but like Cops has been a huge part of like TV history, especially in this country and everything. So it's cool that he was in it, but the toll it takes must have been great.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if you guys appreciate just how big Cops were or was. I mean, he was right. It was America's Most Wanted and Cops, and those were the 2 most watched shows on TV. No one ever missed it on Friday night. It was a big, big deal. So to have been on that many episodes and been a part of that legacy, I think that's a really cool thing. And he mentioned that, just being able to sit on the couch on Saturday and, there's an episode, I remember shooting that.
I'm curious how they go about making a show like Cops efficiently when everyone and their mother knows Cops, and he said knows that camera crew right there is Cops. How is it not flooded with bystanders saying like, look at me, Mom, I'm on Cops? Well,
I think that the difference is I don't know if you could do it today. And I think that's problems with like Night Watch and Live PD is that they see someone, they're going to text their friends, and their friends are going to roll up.
Yeah.
This was in a period of time where you didn't have that option, right? There was no real all access internet, no instant ready cell phones. You can call all your friends. It was something, if you were there and you happened to notice it, yeah, you're going to stand on the side of the street and watch it. But
And shout bad boys.
shout bad boys. But it's not something that's going to go viral instantaneously. So I think that was to their benefit as far as technology goes at the time.
Yeah. A show like that, what do you think? Can we make another reality in public show like that? I know you just said no, but is that even something people want anymore with social media?
I don't know. I don't know if it comes off as authentic anymore, and if it's even grabbing of enough attention. Because the part of Cops certainly was the salaciousness of it, right?
Sure.
Like, oh, I get to see what's actually going on. And I think we're kind of numb to that now, where it was very new and flashy at the time.
Yeah.
From what I can tell, I think we're losing the fly on the wall, just watching people's lives, like the Kardashians. We're losing that, and it's more game shows, reality game shows, competition things. But that's just...
I watch no TV, so I'll take your word for
my
it.
opinion.
But you see that on social media all the time. So
Yeah.
I wish I could be as disciplined as Sean was in just like no social media.
Oh, me too.
Yeah. So it was unintentional that we had Sean on during National Suicide Prevention Month. But I think it connects perfectly with Skyway Down. If someone is having some trouble, Birdie, where can they call?
The National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is 988, and locally here in Hillsborough County is 211. That's the phone number. So you can call if you ever need any help. Mental health is so important in the film industry, in every industry, in everyone's lives. So please reach out if you need, and check out Skyway Downs on Skyway Down on YouTube.
And with that, we got to wrap the episode up. Where can they find us, Miss Birdie Doyle?
We are Loose Framing Podcast. You can stream us anywhere you stream podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube, and don't forget to follow Film Tampa Bay across all platforms.
And with that, we'll see you next time.